I remember the first time I met them, a young Chinese couple that sat down next to me at lunch, and they asked me if I would mind their company. I told them that I would love to spend some time with them. I enjoyed spending time with my students. There are not a whole lot of couples that look like they are in love, but these two emanated love from every pore. And it wasn't that overly affectionate type of love. It was the way that they looked at each other. It was the way they talked to one another. The way they spoke about each other. There was a deep, deep love there. They didn't have English names at the time, so they asked me if I would mind giving them one. Well, you see, this is actually pretty common for Chinese students. They like the English names, so I named them. I named them Richard and Mary, after two friends of mine from school. This lovely couple reminded me a lot of them in a big, big way, and well, association is a huge help when trying to remember like 1,000 Chinese student names. It really does help quite a bit. So Richard and Mary and I began spending a lot of time together. I enjoyed their company, and they enjoyed learning English and spending time with me. As we grew as friends, we began to talk a lot about God and the scriptures, and eventually, they were both baptized into Christ. The greatest part of this whole situation was their love for each other only doubled as they learned to love God and His Word. They spent countless hours in my apartment studying, asking questions, wanting to know more and more about Jesus. It was truly a beautiful journey of faith. I was glad I got to be part of it. Then they went home to see their families over break. Both of them, overcome by their joy found in their new faith in God, shared their love of God with their families, only to be rejected, condemned, disowned, and abandoned. Their families cut them off, stopped paying for school, and left them basically on their own. Here they were, 20 years of age, and they had nothing. I remember the day they showed back up at my apartment, and I, at this point in time, didn't know any of this information about what just had happened. They hugged me, sat down on my couch, and began to tell me their almost identical stories. Both now destitute, no family, no money, no home, no school. Everything was gone. I sat there shocked and blown away. I saw tears streaming down their faces as they shared each other's burdens and pain. But as I sat there and cried alongside of them, I did my best to comfort them. I just said the words that everybody says, it's going to be okay. They both looked up at me with a shocked look on their faces, looked over at each other, and they kind of smiled and then responded to me, "We're not crying because of our loss of everything. We're crying because God thinks that we can overcome these things, that we're strong enough in our faith to overcome such trials. The good book says to be happy about the trials that come our way. We're crying because, we have the opportunity to now put our faith in God in action. When you have nothing, you realize all you need is God." I sat there just stunned by this. The teacher had now become the student. I wish I could tell you that this situation was a one-off. It's not. It happened over and over during my time in China. In fact, this wasn't even the first time this had happened. It happened the first time to a young lady aptly named Joy. Her parents also disowned her, and she lost everything only to find comfort in God's love. It happened to a young man named Lion and a young lady named Apple. It became almost the norm for so many of these young, new Christians. Now, Richard and Mary were a bit different. They married, found jobs. One continued in school while the other worked, and eventually they switched off so that the other one could finish school also. But the greatest part was that they opened their home to a home church and began teaching others about faith. They loved others, and they became mom and dad to so many young Christians who ended up being disowned in the same way. They were living and breathing examples of God's love and grace and mercy in times of trial and persecution, until the day they were arrested for running a house church. Apparently, some of their neighbors found all the people staying with them and visiting them and being in their home quite annoying. So they tipped off the police, and they were both arrested. Over the years, they had influenced thousands, and it doesn't surprise me one bit how this story ends. One of the Christians from the home church contacted me about their arrest because he wanted me to know something about it. He told me this, that when the police came, Richard and Mary smiled, thanked God for the opportunity to represent him, and were led away still smiling. 5 years have passed since their arrest, and they are at 2 different work camps right now. Through my underground contacts, I've been able to get a hold of them and to get word to them and to hear back from them even. But my favorite part is just to tell them how proud I am of them. They are separated, imprisoned for their beliefs, and alone. Or so I thought. You see, they responded in this way. They told me that they thank God every day for their ability to minister to those who are struggling in prison. They told me of new Christians who are being baptized every day in these prison camps. They told me how God has provided for them and how God is good. I'm overwhelmed by this love that they have for the lost. They told me about how much they miss each other, but that other Christians are able to get word to each other through an underground network. That even through all of this, they're not alone. So what is persecution? Let me start by telling you what persecution is not. It's not losing your ability to say a public prayer before a football game. It's not when your youth minister is unable to pray with you at lunch at your school. It's not losing your ability to have a town nativity scene. That's annoying, but it's not persecution. It's someone denying you your American rights. That, yes, absolutely, but it's not persecution on the scale of what we see in the scriptures and in the first century church and what we're seeing around the world today. Persecution costs you something. It demands something of you. Losing a privilege is not the same as losing something you need to live. You see, losing your job for standing up for what is right and good is not persecution. It's you living out your beliefs. Making a stand for that which is righteous and holy is good and great, but you still have the ability to get another job. When we belittle the word persecution down to annoyances, we diminish the sacrifice of those who are actually persecuted. There are people dying for their faith all over the world this very day, in the jungles of Africa, in the sands of the Middle East, and in the megacities of Asia. People are being imprisoned and are losing their lives and everything, and they do so joyfully. And we sit here so often and complain about the most immature things, and it shows. What are we saying to the world when we don't even believe the scriptures we profess? You see, James 1 speaks over and over about being joyful in persecution so that it might produce maturity, and that's the key. When we understand true persecution, we understand how God can use any situation to grow us as Christians. When we understand true persecution, we understand our own spiritual journey and needs. When we become thankful for every situation we come across, we grow. Persecution is rampant in this world, but let us not diminish true persecution by elevating the annoying to the same level as the life-altering. In all things, let us be the church and Christians who understand true persecution. So, as you sit down and as you study persecution and what it means to be persecuted, don't get lost in the mire of the everyday life and the everyday things that are just annoying, but truly separate that which is important and that which is not.